Hello everyone, welcome back to the questions based on jurisprudence. Today's first question. What are the stages of the criminal justice process? Investigation, arrest, charges, trial, sentencing, appeal, and corrections. How did a Finnish define practical reasoning? As the process of choosing actions that promote the common good. According to Finnish, what is the role of law in society? To protect and promote basic human goods and enable human flourishing. What does sociological jurisprudence advocate? Sociological jurisprudence advocates studying law in the context of its social functions and how it influences and is influenced by social, political, and economic structures. What happens after a criminal conviction? The court imposes a sentence such as imprisonment, probation, or fines. What is the role of corrections in criminal justice? Managing offenders, serving sentences, and providing rehabilitation programs. What is the presumption of innocence? The accused is considered innocent until proven guilty. What does due process ensure in criminal justice? That legal proceedings are fair, transparent, and lawful. What is proportionality in criminal justice? Punishment should match the severity of the crime. What does equality before law mean? All individuals are treated equally within the legal system, regardless of status. How does sociological jurisprudence view law? Sociological jurisprudence views law as a social phenomenon, not just a set of rules meant to maintain order and to resolve conflicts. How does law regulate a conduct? By prescribing required behaviors and prohibiting harmful ones. Why is law important in conflict management? It provides a structured process for resolving disputes peacefully. How does law promote a social cooperation? By setting rules for fair exchange, contracts, and their business dealings. What is the role of law in legitimizing power and authority? It provides a framework for governance and a political control. How does law act as a deterrent? Law acts as a deterrent by imposing sanctions that prevent unlawful behavior through fear of consequences. What is the purpose of criminal law in social control? To deter harmful behavior and ensure public safety. What was John Finney's contribution to natural law? John Finney argued that laws should respect basic human goods like life, knowledge, and friendship. What is positive law? Positive law refers to laws created by sovereign authorities regardless of moral considerations. According to John Austin, what makes a law valid? A law is valid if it emanates from a sovereign authority and follows the proper legal procedures. How does Kelson's pure theory of law define legal validity? A law is valid if it conforms to higher norms in a hierarchical legal system, with the ground norm being the ultimate source of authority. What is the difference principle? Social and economic inequalities are justified only if they benefit the least advantaged. What does Rawls mean by public reason in law? Laws must be justifiable to all citizens based on a fairness and a mutual respect. How does Rawls critique utilitarianism? Rawls argues that utilitarianism may justify sacrificing individual rights for the greater good. How does Rawls' theory relate to social contract theory? Rawls revives it by proposing that just institutions arise from agreements made under the veil of ignorance. What role does law play in Rawls' theory? Law enforces justice as fairness by protecting rights and structuring inequalities to benefit the least advantaged. How does civil law contribute to social control? By resolving disputes between individuals and regulating social interactions. What is the main focus of liberal feminism? Liberal feminism advocates for legal reforms to ensure equal treatment and opportunity for women, such as equal pay and workplace rights. How does Finnis argue that human rights are grounded in natural law? Finnis believes rights reflect the intrinsic dignity of human beings and are necessary for human flourishing. How does radical feminism view the legal system? Radical feminism sees the law as inherently patriarchal and calls for transformative changes rather than just reforms. What is the connection between law and social change in a sociological jurisprudence? Law should evolve to meet changing social conditions and remain flexible to address societal needs. What does it mean that a law has universality? Law applies universally within its jurisdiction, ensuring consistency and predictability. How does law differ from religious or customary law? Law applies to all within a state, while religious customary laws apply only to specific groups. Why are Fuller and Finnis ideas important for human rights? Fuller and Finnis argue that human rights are inherent and not just legal entitlements. What was the significance of the Golknath case 1967? The Supreme Court ruled that Parliament could not amend fundamental rights, limiting its legislative power. What issue was addressed in the DC Wadhwa case 1987? The case ruled against the arbitrary re-promulgation of ordinances restricting executive and legislative power. What was the key ruling in the Keshavananda Bharati case 1973? The Supreme Court established the basic structure doctrine stating that Parliament cannot amend the Constitution in the way that it alters its fundamental structures. What was reaffirmed in the I.R. Coelho case 2007? The court reaffirmed that laws or amendments violating the basic structure doctrine are invalid. How does Fuller's inner morality of law helps assess modern legal systems? It provides standards for determining whether laws are just and legitimate. And which area of law are Fuller and Finney's ideas particularly influential? Constitutional law. How do Fuller and Finney critique legal positivism? Fuller and Finney argue that laws must have a moral basis and are not just derived from authority. Both modern debates are influenced by Finney's concept of the common good, social justice, economic policies, and legal reforms. What makes law coercive? Law is backed by state power, allowing the imposition of penalties like fines or imprisonment. How does sociological jurisprudence balance interests? Sociological jurisprudence seeks to balance the interests of individuals, groups, and the state to achieve social justice and the common good. Who was Roscoe Pound? Roscoe Pound was a key proponent of sociological jurisprudence and introduced the concept of social engineering. What is Roscoe Pound's theory of social engineering? Social engineering is the idea that law should function as a tool to create and to maintain social order by balancing competing social interests. How are law and morality interconnected? Law reflects and enforces moral values to maintain ethical standards. What is the core idea of the historical school of law? Law is a product of historical development and evolves originally within society. What is the Volksgeist according to Savigny? The national spirit that shapes the evolution of law. Why did Savigny oppose codification of law? Savigny believed that law should develop naturally from customs rather than be imposed by the state.